Adam, welcome to the Youth Ministry in Motion podcast. Is it snowing where you are?
It is, and my kids are overjoyed and thrilled. They they already had the day off for Martin Luther King holiday, so
Sure.
it's not a real snow day, but they're excited.
That's good. Yeah, we're about to get a little bit of they'll call it sleet rain, which I don't know what the difference between sleet rain and snow is, but when I see it falling out of the sky and it's freezing, I don't know. It's snow to me. So we love the weather, but I'd rather talk about small groups. Can we talk about small groups?
I'd much prefer that.
I
Yes.
hear you're pretty good at that. That's at least that's what I read in your
Well,
book. So
well, I can say that I have a immense passion for it. It's changed and transformed me in ways that I still just cannot believe today. And I've gotten to see it happen in other people's lives. And so, I'm a full-time consultant with churches, and I help them with that, and amongst other things, solving the volunteer crisis and things of that matter. But they keep hiring me, so I guess I'm doing all right.
you're doing okay. Well, then clearly there is a need for that. Now, listen, before we jump into all the things that we want to pass on to our viewers and to our listeners, I want to throw you into a scenario here, and kind of let's see if your youth ministry chops are still there. So you're showing up. You got a call that your middle school small group leader is not going to be able to show up. You now are assigned then to take the middle school group. How would you open that session up with a bunch of middle school boys?
Such a great question, right? It is like, I mean, because you bring in the substitute teacher and those students are just licking their chops like, oh, we're gonna get away with anything and everything today. And so first I'd say it's gonna depend circumstantially. Like, I'm gonna take the temperature. Hey, where are we? Are these boys like high wound energy, or are they kind of low, reserved, introverted type? And depending on that temperature, that would determine what I would probably do, if I'm gonna do something fun to open them up, or if I'm gonna do something to kind of lock them in and engage them a little bit
Right,
more if they're. But
right.
I mean, I'd probably start with an icebreaker, honestly, before we jumped into prayer and the study of discussion. I would do an icebreaker so that I can get to know them.
Hmm.
Um, and
And what would that icebreaker be? Let's say they're a little high strung. They're a little bit they're give me the two scenarios. They're a little high strung and say, oh, we're gonna do the icebreaker. What do we do? What's our go-to?
yeah, if they're high strung, we're not doing some short fun game or something to kind of get them energized. We're gonna do some question that kind of gets them thinking a little bit, and it's just real light and simple, but it can reveal a lot about a student, right? It can reveal a lot about them as a person. And hey, what's your favorite superpower? It's like, hey, did that student say they wish they were invisible? It's like, okay, well, why? Right? That can say a lot. I want to be the fastest person in the world. I want to be super fast, or I want to be able to fly. I want to be able to teleport. And hey, travel might be important to that teenager who wants to teleport, or that teenager may have control issues if he wants to be Superman.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that would certainly get some eyes open for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Well, tell everybody a little bit about your background in youth ministry.
Yeah, certainly. So, I became a Christian at 19, so I didn't even really get to grow up attending a youth ministry. So when I
Hmm.
came into the youth ministry world, it was completely new to me in that I had no prior experience as an attendee or as a recipient of youth ministry that would invest into me. So my experience was, I'm coming in, called to ministry, completely blank slate. I just know all the things that the non-youth ministry attendees did that you're probably not going to bring up in youth ministry. I had that type of a experience, if you will, that was not definitely cookie cutter kind of church culture, brought up maybe in a kind of straight laced family, if you will. And so I had a great family, great upbringing, amazing parents. Right, I was very blessed to have that, just not involvement in church and things of that nature. And so my experience in youth ministry coming into it was, I understand how the lost kid thinks. I understand how the biblically illiterate student, teenager coming in instincts, the skepticism, the thoughts of questioning, like that sort of was my what I brought in the tool bag as far as being a student pastor. And so I served in student ministry for a bit of a short stint there, enjoyed that, did young adult ministry as well prior to student ministry, a lot of partnership between those. And then went into an adult groups ministry where I worked a lot with student pastor and we helped train small group leaders for them. And then from there, I was an executive pastor of discipleship where I helped oversee next generation ministries, adult ministry, and so I was overseeing that directly at a higher level. So I've kind of experienced all of it, of the outsider to a student ministry in church,
Hmm.
the one on the front lines, a warrior, if you will, to, furthering student ministry cause, and then almost in the king seat of seeing it play out and helping guide and mentor and help set things up so that we could have a successful student ministry.
Sure. Did small groups during your stint in youth ministry, did small groups play a part? And what did that look like?
Massive. So yeah, when I started my student ministry role as a student pastor, that we didn't have small groups, and so for me, the only way I really knew how to operate in doing ministry to make disciples was small groups. That was just kind of my mo. That was my DNA. That's what had been discipled into me by my mentor, Pastor Jeff Scott, who was really a disciple of Howard Hendricks.
Mm,
Eh,
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. The lineage just goes for right with Howard Hendricks.
that's it. That's it. We talk about a coaching tree, right? In college football, they talk about these coaching trees. Tell you what, that guy, he's got quite the tree.
He sure does. He sure does. And so when I came in, I said, all right, well, if I'm going to start building relationships with these students and we're going to really empower and activate our, student ministry adult volunteers and leaders to be investing into these students because they were just hungry. I mean, they wanted to have meaningful moments of ministry with these teenagers, and these teenagers were craving it themselves. And so what I found was small groups was the place to let that space happen, for them to step in, and that was the stage for the spotlight to shine down and for spiritual formation to happen in teenagers' lives, where it wasn't all up to me on a stage giving a message, although we did those things. It gave me the opportunity for our adult, volunteers and leaders to really emancipate them, like just to free them, take those chains off of like, well, I'm not the pastor, I'm not the student guy, I'm just kind of here, and I was like, no, man, I want you guys full force, just freed to minister to these students, and then even on top of that, some of our high school student leaders, for them to have that freedom, and they invest into our middle school students, and actually our middle school students were far more recipient to a lot of our high school student leaders than some of the adults, right? We launched 26 small groups within the first 6 months of me starting that role and getting that going.
Wow, that's a lot of small groups.
We weren't messing around, man. Yeah, it is. It's a decent amount.
That's a lot of leaders.
It is. Yes. And that's
Uh,
the key. That's the key. You got to have quality leaders.
oh, no question, no question. I know there's probably a lot of youth pastors right here at the beginning of 2024, and some youth pastors are starting to think about small groups. They're starting to think about, should we do small groups? And if we should do small groups, how we should do small groups. So what would you say then to youth pastors who are just starting to kind of, begin to think about this? Where does that youth pastor need to start? Other than first buying your book, of course. They should definitely do that, which there'll be links down in the show notes for sure. But right now in the initial stages of that, what's that process? What should that process kind of look like to them?
Sure. That's such a good question. The thing that I would say first, other than buy my book, right? It would be prayer. Honestly, I have seen God move in the most amazing, miraculous ways where in groups ministry for 6 years, our groups ministry doubled every year for 6 years. Our student ministry doubled. And, we started all those small groups in student ministry. And so, for me, first it's prayer, man. Just getting on my hands and knees before the Lord, just laboring and petitioning before the Lord to do the things that I want to see happen, but I can't in my own power. So that's where I would advise any student pastor to start. As much energy as you got, as many Red Bulls as you drank for breakfast, like just kind of center, get on your hands and knees before the Lord and just plead with him to do the things you can't do. So that's first. But at a practical level, like orthopractic, I would say that you really got to answer the question. And this is what I help churches walk through when we consult and we coach them is, what are the outcomes that you want to see out of doing small groups? Right? Don't just start small groups for the sake of starting small groups to say, hey, we have another program that's offered here. You need to begin, or you need to set the end in mind, have that in mind before you can begin, or you don't know where you're going to be going. I mean, what are you driving towards with having small groups in your student ministry? So, man, what are the outcomes do you want? Do you want to see them read their Bible more? Do you want to see them share their faith more? Do you want to see them mobilized to begin serving in and through your local church more? Do you want to, see off-campus groups started that cultivate deep, meaningful relationships with one another that is inclusive to other students that might otherwise have a clique going? And so you got to just write down in right on paper. If it's not written, it's not real.
There you
You
go.
What are the outcomes you want? And then from your outcomes, then you can kind of build backwards and figure out, okay, well, what does the journey towards that look like? And so a very distinct, measurable, here are the outcomes. And there's a ton of different ways that you can do it. Right, ton of different ways you can structure and set up small groups, and I think there's a ton of resources and books out there on how to do that. My book's not necessarily about how to structure those things. It's really how to help train your group leaders who are going to lead those groups with your students and your teenagers. But looking at, hey, how do I want to structure this so that my leaders are positioned properly to truly achieve the outcomes that we're hoping to see the Lord do in and through our people?
Yeah, and let me piggyback on that because a part of the initial after you've prayed and you come up with your outcomes. My guess is it's a lot easier to figure out what kind of leaders you need to to fulfill that because if your leader choices don't match your outcomes, that's going to be a very difficult that's going to be a very difficult process for you because a lot of times you have an outcome, but you'll pick anybody. Tell me about how your book, points to that as far as the training of leaders and how important that is.
Oh man, it is. I mean, I think it's everything as far as doing ministry. If you want to see your ministry grow, if you want to see your church grow, it comes down to discovering, developing, deploying new leaders. I think that's exactly what Jesus did. I just think that was the biblical model he gave us. Went and found his 12 disciples, invested in them for 3.5 years. You don't need to take that long to onboard new volunteers in your ministry, but you know, uh, and then Jesus sent them out to go and bear much fruit, right? To
Right.
multiply what he had invested into them. And so when it comes down to identifying specific leaders, what you want those outcomes in your group's ministry, or sorry, your small groups ministry to be for students, it needs to really match the type of person. So like if you've got a leader who's primarily lecture based and they've taught Sunday school for your student ministry, in a group setting. Well, if you're trying to be more relational and have deep, meaningful, like that's not the right leader to do that, right? That's going to be a problem. It's going to be some iron sharpening iron in the types of sparks that you don't necessarily want. Yeah. If you're trying to theologically inform your students, the highly relational facilitator in your student small group is not necessarily what you want. In that case, you would want that lecturer in there who can, man, just bring it and give them good, deep theological information. But it just depends. Are you looking for content? Are you looking for community? Are you looking for a blend of both? And so setting those outcomes will help you determine that's the type of leader I need, and those are the types of qualities I need. I need a patient, leader who listens, or I need a high energy leader who can just get people going. And some of that might depend even on the types of students, like we talked about at the very beginning with the icebreaker. Are they
Mhm.
kind of reserved? Are they amped up? And how you pair a leader with those students may also play into some of that.
That's right. Yeah, if you have a leader who doesn't like icebreakers or anything like that, they're like they're resistant to it. You may want to rethink that. But it reminds me, I just got through doing a training this weekend, and they said that they have somebody. I asked, it was a Q&A time, and the youth pastor said, "Hey, listen, I have a guy who that I is in our teaching roundup, right? They schedule, but my kids, they try to find out when he's teaching, and they don't want to show up for that. They don't want to show up for that style of talk." And so to
Right.
speak to that of how important choosing your leaders are, not just choosing them, but training them. Kids are voting with their feet. They're going to vote with their attendance
Mm-hmm.
as to whether or not who that leader is going to be.
100%. That is typically how they do. They say you can vote with your feet or with your pocketbook, but
Yep.
teenagers, they're going to vote with their feet. You either show up or not show up. And I'd tack one other thing on there to that question of where should student pastors start as far as finding out how to get this thing going with small groups. If your church, and not most churches don't have this, but if they have a small groups person on staff at a full time or a bivocational capacity, man, I would tap that resource. And when you can blend and kind of build off the foundation that exists there with adult ministry small groups, that it can help so much to just sort of streamline that into your ministry, because the temptation and sort of the blessing and the curse of student ministry is it's almost like it's its own church inside of a church.
Mm,
You got
yeah.
your own assimilation process, you got your own small group you got your own, service of evangelism. And so when you do that, you can just overload yourself. And if there are some people on staff there who could speak into that or just give you existing structures and resources and trainings,
Yep.
that would so just push you down the road far further. Yeah.
And possibly even offer you some leaders that may come out of these small groups. Like, who would you recommend that maybe they're ready to step out of a small group and lead a small group for a season, maybe?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we found out, so the group leader training resource, the book that we put together over 6 years, we had over 1,000 group leaders go through that training in 6 years. And so we collected data, we asked questions. And one of the interesting things that we discovered as we went through that was 75% of people who went through that training, which was for adult small groups ministry, right? 75% became a leader. The other 25% all started serving in some capacity. It was either kids ministry, student ministry was the really the popular one, or just in some other capacity. And so what you may find is there are those who will go through that training with, you're maybe adult ministry small group person or executive pastor or lead pastor, whatever size church you've got there. And they may say, I don't want to do adults, but I think I'm feeling led to do small group ministry with teenagers. And you can just, man, really benefit from that.
Yeah, where do I sign you up? Where please sign
Yeah.
this contract for the next 6 weeks. Um, Before we get more, I want to talk more about the book, but I want to ask you a few questions, just some practical type things, like how long should a small group run for? Right there, people think, well, does it run forever? Does it run through the summer? Does it run all year? Give a sense of how long a small group could or should run for, especially with teenagers.
Yeah, that's going to go right back to the initial question of what do you want the outcomes to be of your small group? And so, like, if it's more content driven than doing them seasonally, like 6 weeks here, 12 weeks there, then that's probably going to be a more fitting structure. Now, if you're looking for like longevity of relationships that your volunteers are getting to, I mean, really forge with these teenagers, then man, having these groups go for a long time. And so, what we did is, we would start a new group, and the expectation was, hey, this is a for life group.
Hmm.
Now they never yeah, I right, and that sounds pretty daunting. We weren't like, "Hey, you're stuck in this for the rest of your life," right? There wasn't. We
Yeah,
we promoted a little better than that, right? And
sure, sure.
but the expectation was just, "Hey, we're after deep, meaningful relationships because that's where we believe the most transformation is gonna happen." And so, what we did see practically was as people were fellowshipping together, they were growing, and then they mobilized because we would train our group leaders how to mobilize their members in the group to serve. We sort of duplicated ourselves into these people or replicated ourselves into our leaders. How do you get your group members starting to serve and contribute into the kingdom and not just be consumers, but contributors to the cause of Christ? And then also how to share their faith. And so as they were kind of moving the needle forward and from a consumer to a contributor,
Right.
we saw that people felt called to go start their own group and to make their own disciples of Christ. And so there was multiplication happening about every 2 to 3 years, just organically and naturally, as God kind of called them out and sent them into another group plant, if you will, within the same church or same ministry. If you just so there's not confusion in some of my language, but some of the cultural language that I've used or we've used. Length again, it's just going to be determined by, well, what do you want out of this? Is this going to be more content driven? Is it going to be more community driven? I've seen student ministries, and I really like this model where you have a student, small group adult leader, right? The adult leader of a group, and they go with students from all the way from 6th grade through 12th grade. They see them for 6 years and graduate them out. And there's just a lot of beautiful things about some things with that I've seen. And those teenagers coming back to visit and just spend time with that small group leader who's now a person who's invested in them that will forever uh, carry with that teenager for the rest of their life, that relationship, the investment. I mean, just so much. And it's a foundation, a pillar for them to go back to that formed them in a very crucial point in their life.
Yeah, that's such a good point. There are those groups that I've heard of where and that's one of the questions I think that youth pastors are asking. Do I keep the same adult leader and they're going to see them through, they're going to travel with them? In other words, their small group, as long as their leader is available and open to it, will travel with them through the 12th grade. And like you said, it's significant. It's a significant for many of these students to have that same group leader. Are there any other models you'd recommend too that says, okay, well, one choice is this is a forever group that this leader is going to travel. Would there be another model or another suggestion you would offer that as far as a model of a small group?
Oh yeah, there's so many out there, right? And so there's a common phrase that I've learned from a mentor, a good friend, and he says this. He says, "Pick your model, pick your problem."
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, yeah. Pick your model, pick your problem. I got that from Jared Musgrove, and so he was at the Village. He's at the Well Community Church now, and in Argyle, Texas. But I mean, just godly man, loves the Lord, and tons of respect for him. So yeah, I mean, another model because like you may be in a high transient culture where your adult leaders come in and they're only here for 2 years. There might be a military base nearby. It might be our main volunteer base are interns from the local, college that's nearby, and they're here for 2 years and then they're gone. And so you may want to consider we need to do semester based, or we need to do, hey, you're with students for 1 year in a group. And I mean, there are other models that, instead of just meeting on campus as a student ministry, they can meet in homes. And there's some, different unique challenges that need to be considered there. I think it's important to have multiple leaders a part of a group. And I think there's some big benefits there. Considering mid-sized groups of not just 8 and then hope all of them show up, because if 6 of them are out, you've only got 2 there. So considering, all right, well, let's have 15 to 20 teenagers in one group if that, makes sense on your scale. But for the most part, whatever model you're going to look at, it can scale up or down, and you just got to figure out, man, what are we trying to do and what makes sense with our culture?
Let me move on to this because I want to start moving into your book a little bit too. What do you say the difference is between, because I know your book talks about fellowship, talks about those things, but what is the difference between community and fellowship? On the surface, they seem the same, that you can build community and fellowship, but is there a difference between the two?
Right. Yeah, completely different. And this is a nuance I didn't really understand that I just jumped in. I would say, hey, let's get in and let's find community. Let's find community. And then come to realize, like, hey, you don't find community, you forge community. It happens over digging in, investment, text messages, phone calls, late nights, consistent meeting with people over coffee or in the group, or I mean, in so many different forms or ways and fashions. So I was an ice hockey player, right? I grew up playing ice hockey, and so my community was found in the teammates I played ice hockey with. And, just like football, man, there's a deep bond there. And so there's a deep community. And then when I get out of that, I get into the church, 19, 20 years of age, and I'm going, man, this is not the same type of community. Like this isn't, I don't sense the same depth of community that I had in sports. And so I had to find some language to help me navigate that in my heart to go, okay, well, that was community, but what I'm doing with these people, this is fellowship. And here's the biblical difference, right? Here, biblically, this is the definition of the two is community is here now and it's for a season, but fellowship is forever. Fellowship with God, right? Allows me
Hmm.
to have fellowship with brothers and sisters in the faith. And so what I do in building and forging a relationship with other brothers and sisters in Christ now, it lasts forever.
Yeah.
I, I am investing in making these relationships that we're just starting, and we're going to increase more and more for all of eternity. And so I say, hey, we're making forever friends. That's how I kind of term that.
Well, let me go ahead and ask this. How does one, I know we say that we do small groups because we want to do discipleship. Okay. How does a youth pastor measure discipleship in a small group beyond attendance? Right? They say, well, they're attending the small group, therefore disciples are being made. That they make that correlation. Well, they're showing up, so therefore that's what's happening. But you tell us, how does that, how what's a is there a better way to measure discipleship other than saying, well, they're showing up for the small group?
Yes. Yes. So what I have often said to churches that I work with or I consult is there are quantitative measurements and there are qualitative measurements. And when you look at a group, I think the biggest win of a group is not how often they meet, attendance wise at their weekly meeting, but how often do they communicate and get together outside of the scheduled meeting time. And that's true for adults, that's true for teenagers. And some of those things you just can't measure. You cannot look and go, wow, they really have the fruits of the spirit increase from a 1 to like a 10 now. Like you you can't necessarily quantify those things.
That's
And
right.
so right, there are immeasurable spiritual qualities that begin to be cultivated in these teenagers' lives. And I think the only way that you can recognize, acknowledge, measure, and then therefore celebrate those is through those relationships being built with the adult leader or the small group leader. And so, I mean, you can do spiritual growth assessments, you can do some different things like that to help them quantify it. I think those are good. Can't put all your stock into those things. There's always some piece that doesn't get a holistic picture. And look at measuring, all right, well, hey, are they here more often than they were before? Attendance. I think that's good. Attendance tells you not how spiritually mature they are, but the trajectory. Has it stayed the same or has it increased for them to be spiritually formed in the image of Christ? That's what attendance tells you. And so, is their character being changed over the last 2 years? That small group leader is going to be able to go, yeah, yeah. I mean, they have matured significantly in this area, in this area, in this area. They have grown up right before, and that, I mean, that truly is right. I mean, middle school, high school, those some of the biggest grown up that you can see in a physical sense, in an emotional sense, and they get a front row seat to be a part of that. So, attendance is not going to be your primary measurement. I mean, that's going to be one that tells you how high is a student's trajectory or not. Because if they're not showing up, they're going to lose that opportunity to build a relationship, to see spiritual formation to begin happen. Is Bible reading happen? Are they moving from consumer to contributor? I think that's one of the biggest measurements that you can track is, are they serving in some type of ministry in this ministry and through the local church? Or, I mean, outside of that, I mean, and ascribing value to that too. And getting to hear, right? So just very practical level, you're like, hey, Adam, that sounds good. How do I, actually practically kind of gauge, is character formation happening? Uh, you're going to know most through the stories that you hear from your small group leaders. Getting to hear those stories, life change, life transformation. Those I think are going to be the most powerful ways and some of the most insightful ways for you to measure, is discipleship happening?
And wow, there's a lot there. And I hope if you're watching, listen, I hope you're taking notes, because if you're not taking notes on this, you're going to miss some of those little things that right there is telling you what a small group leader should be looking for. Because that's the question that'll be asked of you should be asking your leaders is, how will they know discipleship is happening? And then when you ask the question, then that adult leader or whoever may be leading can tell you and say, yeah, I've seen this. Something I like to do is I say, tell me a story, right? They can tell me they had 6 kids or 8 kids, or they played a game or they did a thing. I like to say, tell me a story about somebody in your small group, or tell me a story about some interaction you had with a student, which then would tell me something else beyond just facts or stats or those type of things. But you're able to say, hey, this is what I'm noticing or seeing because of an interaction I had through whatever may have happened.
Yeah, that I love that. That is such a good system. I mean, yeah, it's just going to come down to, hey, what's your system to do that and to try and gauge and to measure? Is it going to be the relational conversation 101? Is it going to be in a small, a student ministry volunteer leader meeting? And hey, come up here and share a story. It can all depend, but we do have we've been working on this, and so this is something we'll be making free to anyone who could find value in this, but a top tips for student ministry small group leaders.
Oh,
So that's
wow,
a
great.
yes, that's a resource we've developed. A lot of it, pull stuff from the group leader training book, and so I think probably in the next month we'll have that ready just to put out there, and anyone can download that for free to just use and help equip some of their small group leaders.
I'm going to put that link when it is ready to go. I'll put that link down in the show notes so that you can go ahead and grab that for yourself. So be sure to check the show notes. If it's not there right now, keep checking it and say, oh, I really want that. Of course, we'll give websites and those type of things, because I'm sure it'll be available wherever the book's available, wherever the resource on your website and so forth will be available, I imagine. Can you give everybody the website real quick?
Buildgroups.net is where you can go and find out. We have dozens of free discipleship resources if you make a free account on there, just for you to be able to benefit from. Again, buildgroups.net.
So as we begin to start to kind of close things out a little bit, let me ask you about churches that have small youth groups, or small churches with small youth groups. What do you advise? Because I know some people think, well, Paul, I am a small group. I can't do small groups, because I think that's a trendy word. I think that's a trendy phrase, that small groups requires you to have multiple campuses and 24 homes in the community. And, you have all this stuff that in reality, if you have a small group, right, how do these principles transfer into a group of, let's say, 7 to 10 students that you might have in your youth ministry right now?
Yes. So, earlier I said there's a ton of books out there on how to structure small groups ministry, whether it's adult or student level.
Mhm.
And my resource in particular is all about, it's a workbook all about helping equip the group leader, the
Right.
small group leader. And so getting into at the actual meeting time and discuss, well, what does that look like? What are the interpersonal parts of that I need to pay attention to, or I need to try, or I need to be conscious of, and helping the fellowship, the study, the prayer, growth. How do I make the most of that opportunity to mobilize someone to serve and to share their faith? And that, what you do in that group models what they will probably do in their own walk with the Lord. And so I would say, if you've got a student ministry of 8 students and that is your small group, that's your whole ministry. Uh, I would say, be the best small group leader that you can be, because if you can be that then and there at that size that you are currently, you'll be so prepared to help model and bring along the next adult volunteer or leader. When you start to scale up as God entrusts to you more souls of teenagers to steward and to see spiritually formed, I'd say for now, just be the very thing that you hope others would be as you begin to grow. Uh, you can still also put a plan together to structure to scale as you get larger. And so I do that with a lot of churches. I work with churches from the sizes of over 8,000 all the way down to 100. And it's funny, they all have the same problems. Some of them just have a little bit bigger hole because they have more people to steward. And so with smaller churches, I find it so fun and exciting to help them build out that structure that is scalable for them when they hit 200, 400, 800, 1,000. And so they are far ahead of the eight ball. And so if your group is 8, I'd say, man, be the best small group leader you can be and prepare to structure that is scalable.
Right. And I think that's important to say too, that if you are the youth pastor of a group of 7 to 8, this book is your training manual. You
Yep.
are the leader, right? So you are instructing yourself on things like, what is a healthy, small group? What is a discipleship small group? What are the elements that are a part of, of being a good leader for a small group, is in this book.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. Hmm.
And so if you're listening, you're watching, and you are, like I said, this book is either for you as of a small church, it's for you. If you have a larger youth group, it's for you. If you have a super big youth group, it's for you. It's about training your leaders, and it's about training. Yeah, you'll get ideas like Adam said about structure and those type of things. But if you're looking to develop the leaders, you got to have the right kind of leaders. Otherwise, your small groups aren't going to work anyway. Then you want to be sure that you're doing the training first and foremost for yourself. So tell me then, Adam, tell me about small group leader training course and the workbook and how it equips churches to build healthy groups and disciples. What is in this that's going to help the leader of a small youth group, 7 to 8 students, and it's going to help the youth pastor that has to manage a group of 100.
100%. Yeah. So there's a ton of great resources out there. And I saw some that were really good on the theological side, some that were really good at the practical best practices side, and some were really good at heart level relational. And I just wanted to make something that had all those things just smashed into one. And it wasn't a book you read, but it was a workbook that
Yeah.
went through. And so it's a 5-session training. Depending on what pace you want to go at, you can do it 5 weeks in a row. You can do it every other week for 10 weeks. You can do it once a month for 5 months. And so it's all based on Acts 2:42 through 47, right? The fellowship, growth, devoted themselves, the apostles' teaching, selling of the belongings, service, and then the Lord adds their number day by day, those who are being saved. And so the 5 sessions are: what is a healthy group and a healthy leader? We give a leader assessment tool that you can provide. It's a template that we offer on our website. You can download and adjust to whatever you want, customize that template to say, hey, fill this out before you serve in our ministry. Just assess where you are, what's your strengths, your weaknesses, what's your likes, your dislikes, what's your understanding of this biblically? How would you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5 of biblical knowledge or of leadership or of, you know, just building relationships, period. So all those different things that are in that we've developed over the years and seen has helped us give a lot of insight into who could be a potential good leader or who, isn't. And so first one, what is a healthy group, healthy leader? Fellowship, how to build meaningful relationships that last forever. 3, grow. How do you help these teenagers grow? It's not just a session on how do you study the Word of God. I think there's a lot of resources out there, but this is more the interpersonal. How do you help students move forward in their faith and progress? 3, how do you help mobilize them to begin serving? Very practical, good stuff that works at all age groups. And then 4, how do you begin sharing your faith communally together as a group? Like, how do you just get this teenagers small group just on fire to share the word of God and share the gospel with their lost friends? And so yeah, all that is in there. There's videos based online that complements each session. There are doctrinal assessments as well that are very fun and exciting. It's not like an interrogation like some of those things can feel like. It's when my leaders have gone through it, they're just, man, this is so fun, and they have such great conversation. So that's a bit of what is in that. And there's more information that gives a whole overview outline of that training before you would purchase it at buildgroups.net/GLT. GLT for group leader training.
Well, and fantastic. If you're watching and listening, you want to go over to the website. The website will, once again, the link will be down below. And the leadership training, whether, like I said, whether you're training yourself, which you should train yourself first because that's important, so you can train others. But also you have this this systematic way of doing things that builds level upon level, precept upon precept, so to speak, where you can then move your leaders from moving just being able just to teach a thing. There's plenty of that's the thing, right? There's plenty of teachers who love to teach, but the leaders you're looking for are the ones who are going to move the ball ahead. They're going to move progressively, move their group from phase to stage in that dynamic to be able to do that. And that's what these sessions are going to do. They're going to help you get your leaders on track to say, look, these are how our small groups are designed. These are the kind of leaders we want. This is where we want to be able to move our students. And that's why the videos and the training is so important.
Yes, that hit every single facet that you can think of in a systematic approach. It is pre-built, turnkey, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. That's why I put that resource together, to free you up to do more ministry and not feel like you got to write all these different things and get them together when maybe that's not your gifting.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for being a part today. I appreciate you being on the show. If people have questions or they want to contact you or reach out to you on social or other places, what are the best places people can reach out to you to ask more questions?
You can shoot me a text message at 434-444-6376. That's my cell phone. That's not just, that's my legit number. That's a risky business there, and I'm doing it. So you can shoot me a text, or you can check me out on Facebook, Instagram, Adam Ehrlichman, or Build Groups. We've got two different, pages and accounts and things like that. So, but yeah, would love to connect, answer questions, hear what you got going on, and man, just see how we can work together to advance the kingdom. That's my heart.
Adam, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for sharing this resource to help train leaders to be better small group leaders, to make better disciples.
Amen. Thanks for having me on, Paul. This is fun. I really enjoyed it. This is my heart and passion. I can keep you here for hours, just locked down on the mic and the video. So thank you. Thank you.